My wife sold my car without permission while I paid the loan, so I bought back the car under my name and left her speechless. I'm a 31-year-old guy, and for years, my car wasn't just a vehicle, it was the one thing in my life that I bought entirely on my own. I still remember the day I signed the papers, the smell of the dealership's cheap air freshener, the salesman's overly wide grin, and the weight of the pen in my hand as I realized, finally, I owned something nobody could take credit for. I worked overtime, saved relentlessly, and made every loan payment with a kind of stubborn pride, even when my wife, Jenna, rolled her eyes and called it a financial burden. To me, that car wasn't just metal and wheels, it was a rare piece of independence in a marriage where most decisions seemed to bend in Jenna's favor. I'd take late-night drives just to clear my head, the soft hum of the engine, the empty roads, the faint scent of the leather, it was the only place where my thoughts felt like they belonged to me. But Jenna hated it. She'd stand by the door with her arms crossed whenever I grabbed the keys and mutter things like, "Must be nice having all this extra time to waste," or, "You care more about that stupid car than this relationship." At first, I brushed it off as her being dramatic, but the comments kept coming, sharper each time. One evening, as I slipped into the driver's seat, she appeared behind me and said coldly, "One day, that car is going to cost us something we can't afford." I remember gripping the steering wheel, feeling the leather tighten under my fingers as a strange chill crawled up my spine. Something in her tone felt less like concern and more like a warning. And for the first time, I wondered if Jenna's irritation wasn't just jealousy, maybe it was something deeper, something possessive, something quietly brewing beneath the surface. But I had no idea how much worse it was about to get. It started subtly. Jenna would look at me with this tight smile and mutter, "You know, sometimes I think you love that car more than our marriage." She'd say it like a joke, but her eyes didn't match her tone. The first couple of times, I laughed it off, but the comments grew sharper, more frequent, more intentional. She'd bring it up during arguments that had nothing to do with the car, like she was trying to wedge it into every insecurity she could find. Then came the pressure to upgrade. Not for me, for her. "We should get a family SUV," she kept saying, even though we didn't have kids and weren't trying for any. I'd ask, "Why?" "We don't need one," and she'd roll her eyes like I was being stubborn just to annoy her. One night she snapped, "It's time to grow up. You don't need some flashy toy." The car wasn't flashy. It wasn't even new. But to her, it represented something she couldn't control. I really started noticing things though. The blow-up happened on a Tuesday night, over something as mundane as budgeting. I was sitting at the kitchen table reviewing bills when Jenna suddenly slammed her hand down and yelled, "I'm so tired of this. That stupid car is ruining our marriage." Her voice cracked in a way I'd never heard before, equal parts anger and desperation. I stared at her, stunned. "How is my car ruining anything?" I asked, trying to stay calm. But she was already pacing, her footsteps sharp against the tile, like she was walking circles around the argument to corner me with it. Then she turned and pointed at me. "Give me the documents," she said. "All of them. Title, loan info, everything. I'll manage things responsibly since you clearly can't." The demand was so sudden it took me a moment to process it. I told her the loan was solely in my name, that I'd taken care of every payment from day one, and I wasn't handing over control just because she was overwhelmed. Her face twisted into something cold. "Wow," she spat. "You're selfish. You're not ready for a real partnership." And with that, for a few days, it felt like I was living with a completely different woman. Jenna suddenly became sweet, unusually sweet. She'd come up behind me while I cooked breakfast and wrap her arms around my waist, whispering, "I'm sorry about the other night. I was stressed." She made my favorite dinners, cleaned the kitchen without complaining, and even laughed at my dumb jokes like she used to when we first started dating. Part of me wanted to believe she had just cooled down, that maybe the fight had been a wake-up call for her. But another part of me felt a strange heaviness in my chest, like her sweetness was just a soft blanket covering something sharp underneath. Then she started asking questions. Too many questions. What time are you leaving for work tomorrow? When do you think you'll be back? Do you have overtime this week? She'd ask it casually, stirring a pot or scrolling through her phone, but her eyes always flicked up toward me with a weird intensity. When I'd answer, she'd respond with, "Oh, that's perfect," or, "Good, you should take the chance to earn some extra cash." At first, I told myself she was just trying to reconnect, maybe even plan something nice as a surprise. But each day her behavior grew more polished, more intentional, like she was hitting every note of a performance she'd rehearsed. She'd smile too widely, laugh too softly, touch me too gently. It felt less like affection and more like manipulation dressed in romance. One night when I got home that evening, exhausted from a brutal double shift, the world seemed to tilt sideways. The parking spot in front of our building, the one where my car sat every single day, was empty. At first, my brain tried to rationalize it. Maybe I parked down the street. Maybe it got towed. But I knew exactly where I'd left it. My keys felt heavy in my hand, my heart started pounding, and my legs suddenly felt unsteady as the cold realization settled in: my car was gone. Completely gone. I called Jenna immediately. She picked up on the second ring, her tone light, almost cheerful. "Oh. Don't freak out," she said, as if I'd misplaced a sock. "I took care of our financial problems today." My throat tightened. "What are you talking about? Where is my car?" She exhaled like she was dealing with a child. "Relax. I sold it. A buyer offered a great deal, I couldn't pass it up." For a moment I couldn't even speak. The room felt like it was spinning. "You sold my car?" I finally managed. "Yes," she said, sounding proud of herself. "And don't worry, I already used some of the money to pay off my credit card debt. You should thank me, honestly." I pressed my hand to my forehead, trying to steady myself. "Jenna, that car is legally in my name. I'm still." The morning after Jenna sold my car, I woke up with this sick, restless feeling in my stomach, like my instincts were screaming that the story she told me wasn't the whole truth. While she showered, I walked past her laptop on the dining table and noticed something unusual: it was unlocked. Jenna almost never left her devices open. My pulse quickened. I told myself I wasn't snooping, I was trying to understand how the hell she sold a car that didn't belong to her. I clicked into her messages, praying I'd find something that made sense. Instead, what I found made everything worse. There were chats with a man named Kyle, a name I recognized only because Jenna constantly complained about him. She'd called him arrogant, insufferable, the reason she hated going into the office. Except the messages told a different story. They were surprisingly warm. Friendly. Flirty, even. Then I saw the part that made my breath catch: "The car is ready whenever you want to pick it up." Smiling face with smiling eyes, she'd sold my car to him. I tracked down his number from the thread and called him. He answered immediately, sounding confused but polite. "Oh, are you Jenna's husband?" "Look, man. I bought the car thinking it was hers." She showed me pictures of documents. I assumed she was there. Walking into the lawyer's office felt like stepping into a place where, for the first time since this nightmare started, I might finally breathe again. I laid out everything: how Jenna sold the car behind my back, how the loan was still active, how she insisted on calling it shared property. The lawyer listened carefully, his expression stiffening as I talked. When I finished, he leaned back, folded his hands, and said, "She had zero legal right to sell that car. Title and loan are both solely in your name. That makes this an unauthorized sale, and the buyer is required to return the vehicle immediately." Hearing that should have made me feel relieved, but instead, there was this heavy wave of anger at how close she came to pulling this off. The lawyer continued, "Depending on how far she went, she could face civil consequences. Potentially even charges if we pursue them. But first, we get your car back." Those words, "get your car back," made my chest tighten. For days I'd felt powerless, but now the ground shifted slightly under my feet. I wasn't trapped anymore. I had leverage. He told me to gather everything, screenshots of her messages with the buyer. Her texts admitting she'd sold it. The transaction logs she stupidly forwarded to herself. The messages where Kyle, the buyer, confirmed she presented herself as the legal owner. Every piece of evidence, every breadcrumb she left behind in her arrogance, became ammunition. By the time I returned the next day, he had already drafted a formal demand for immediate return of the vehicle. The tone was sharp, professional, and undeniably serious. This wasn't a petty marital argument anymore. It was a legal hammer dropping directly on the scheme she thought she could finesse her way through. As I signed the documents authorizing him to move forward, a strange calm settled in my chest. Jenna's perfect little plan was collapsing faster than she ever imagined, and for the first time, I wasn't just reacting. I was preparing the counterstrike. And part of me knew she wasn't ready for. I waited until Jenna got home from work, sitting at the dining table with every piece of evidence laid out in front of me, printed messages, screenshots, legal papers. When she walked in, she gave me that practiced smile she'd been using all week, the one that never quite touched her eyes. "Hey, you're home early," she said cautiously. I gestured for her to sit, keeping my voice steady. "We need to talk. And I need you to listen." I explained everything, how I found her messages, how I contacted Kyle, how he confirmed she presented herself as the legal owner, and how a lawyer had already drafted the paperwork. Her face shifted through a dozen expressions, confusion, anger, fear, before settling on something cold and defensive. "You went through my laptop," she snapped. "That's an invasion of privacy. I did what I did for our future, because you refused to think long-term." The audacity of it almost made me laugh. "You sold my car to another man and used the money to pay your debt," I said. "Don't twist this into some noble sacrifice." Then I told her the part she never expected, the legal consequences. The buyer would have to return the car. She could face civil charges. Her actions were documented, traceable, undeniable. Her confidence shattered instantly. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Wait, charges? No. No, no, please, we can fix this privately. We don't have to involve anyone else." She reached for my arm, but I pulled back. "This wasn't an accident, Jenna. You planned this. You lied. You stole. You crossed a line you can't just charm your way out of." The color drained from her face as she realized she'd lost control of the narrative, of me, of everything she tried to manipulate. She sank onto the. Meeting Kyle, Jenna's coworker, felt surreal. We agreed to meet in a public parking lot near his apartment, and when I arrived, he was already standing beside my car with the legal documents in his hands. The moment he saw me, he lifted both palms in a gesture of surrender. "Man, I'm really sorry," he said before I even introduced myself. "As soon as I got your lawyer's letter and saw the paperwork, I knew something was off. I had no idea she wasn't the legal owner." His voice wasn't defensive, just genuinely embarrassed that he'd been pulled into a mess that wasn't his. I handed him the documents, and he signed them without hesitation. "No resistance?" I asked, more out of habit than suspicion. He shook his head. "Not after seeing those messages." She made it sound like she was drowning financially and, emotionally. He paused, wincing. I didn't realize she might have been manipulating me too. Hearing that hit harder than I expected, not because I cared about her relationship with him, but because it confirmed just how deep her lies went. She hadn't just stolen my car. She'd woven an entire narrative to justify it. Once the legal transfer was done, Kyle stepped back and said quietly, "I hope things work out for you. You didn't deserve any of this." It was the first genuine apology I had heard throughout all of this. I slid behind the wheel, and the familiar smell of the interior hit me like a memory I thought someone had tried to erase. I drove straight to a mechanic, no stops, no detours. I told them to inspect every inch, check for damage, and change all locks and codes. I wasn't taking any chances. And when I finally drove it home, it didn't take long for Jenna to launch her counterattack. Within days, she started telling our families and mutual friends that I had humiliated her by involving lawyers, painting herself as the wounded spouse blindsided by my aggression. She cried to her sister, ranted to her coworkers, even called my mother to say I was destroying the marriage over a car. For a moment, I wondered if people might actually believe her. Jenna had always been good at twisting narratives until she looked like the victim. But this time, the truth had teeth. Because once people learned the actual sequence of events, that she'd stolen my car, sold it without permission, forged a story to a coworker, and pocketed the money, her support evaporated. All at once. Her sister called me, horrified. My mom apologized for even questioning me. Friends who once defended Jenna quietly stepped back from her. And suddenly, Jenna realized her usual weapons, guilt, manipulation, charm, were useless. She stormed into the living room one evening, eyes blazing, and shouted, "You're ruining my life. You didn't have to make this official." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even stand up. I just said, "I didn't ruin your life, Jenna. You did that when you stole something that wasn't yours and lied about it." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. She stared at me as if seeing. Filing for separation felt strangely peaceful, like stepping out of a burning room and realizing I'd been choking for years without noticing. My lawyer moved quickly, isolating every account, freezing joint access, and rerouting my direct deposits so Jenna couldn't touch a single cent. The moment the papers were submitted, I felt something inside me loosen, like shackles I didn't realize I wore were finally falling away. Jenna, on the other hand, felt the ripples instantly. She called me at work, at home, at midnight, her number lighting up my phone again and again, her voicemails cracking with desperation. "Please," she sobbed in one message, "I did everything for us. I acted out of love. But I refuse to play that game anymore." I kept every response, when I responded at all, cold, brief, and strictly logistical. No emotion. No comfort. No argument for her to twist. Silence became the exact kind of revenge she never saw coming, because nothing terrified Jenna more than losing control over the narrative. Word of what actually happened spread farther than she expected. Coworkers whispered. Friends distanced themselves. Her own family stopped defending her, finally seeing through the facade she'd maintained for years. She tried to spin different versions of the story, but every lie she told collapsed the second someone mentioned the legal documents or the messages she'd sent Kyle. The social circle she relied on for attention and affirmation began shrinking one person at a time. She showed up at the apartment door once, tear-stained and shaking. "You're abandoning me," she whispered. "After everything I did for you." But I didn't let her inside. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said, "I'm done." And then I closed the door. She tried guilt-tripping me again afterward, texts about being lonely, messages saying I was cold, heartless, unfair. But moving into my new apartment felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. The place wasn't big, and it wasn't fancy, but the moment I carried the last box inside and looked out the window to see my car parked safely under the streetlight, something inside me settled. It felt like a symbol, of everything I'd reclaimed, everything I refused to let her take from me. For the first time in a long time, the space around me felt mine. Quiet. Uncomplicated. Free of the constant tension I'd normalized without realizing it. As I unpacked, I kept thinking about how Jenna's betrayal didn't come out of nowhere, it exposed years of manipulation I had brushed aside. Her jokes, her guilt trips, her controlling habits. I saw them all differently now, like someone finally turned the lights on in a dim room and revealed the cracks in the walls. It hurt, but it also freed me. Because once you see that someone never loved you the way you loved them, the illusion shatters. And what's left behind is clarity. I filed the final paperwork a few weeks later, sealing off every access point she once used to influence or drain me. Bank account separated. Car title secure. Legal protections in place. Not out of spite, but because I finally valued myself enough to protect what was mine. The moment the last document was stamped, I felt a weight lift from my chest so suddenly that I had to sit down. Months passed. I didn't follow her life on purpose, but people talked. Apparently she was drowning in debt, cycling through friend groups, and struggling at work after her lies about the car sale unraveled publicly. And yet, I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No anger. Just distance, like remembering a story that happened to someone else. Meanwhile, I built something better. Routine. Therapy. Peaceful evenings. A quiet home where nothing slammed, nothing twisted, nothing manipulated me into doubting my own sanity. And as I locked the door one night and looked out at my car, my freedom, I realized something simple and devastatingly true. I didn't have to destroy her life. She did it all by herself the moment she tried to destroy mine.